Whenever someone goes missing, nearly everyone is a suspect. And one by one, friends and family members are looked at. Everyone points the finger and everyone has a theory into what really happened. Sometimes all the dots line up and the case is open and shut. And other times, it's like half the pieces of the puzzle are missing. Gossip begins to spread like wildfire, and people who actually have information to help find the missing are too afraid to talk. So they sweep it under the rug as if it never really happened. When you're 20 years old, you feel invincible, like nothing can touch you, until it does. And everything you've ever loved and everyone you've ever loved is gone. This is the case into the disappearance of Elaine Park, and this is Gone in a Blink. Hey, true crime fans, I'm your host Heather.
And I'm Danielle.
Welcome to episode 17 of Gone in a Blink. School is finally out for a lot of the kiddos, and it feels like summer is officially here. Except, I guess not yet, technically, right? When is the official first day of summer, like June 20th?
I hear all kinds of things. June 20th, June 21st. Honestly, I consider this weekend the official start of summer.
I kind of look at it like as soon as the kiddos are out, summer is officially here. The pools in my area are open, and to me, it's summer for real. But so today's case is one out of Calabasas, California, and it's one that I feel has led many in various directions, including back to Elaine's own mother. This case is one that seems to have run cold, baffling Elaine Park's family and friends, as well as local investigators and many true crime sleuths and armchair detectives. This is the case of Elaine Park. So if you're ready, let's jump right in. Elaine Park was born on September 24th, 1996 to Ray and Susan Park. Her parents ended up getting divorced when she was 10 years old, and so she then lived with her mother and her older brother, Dustin, in the small community of La Crescenta, California, which is just north of Los Angeles. She attended La Crescenta Valley High School and had a large group of friends that she hung out with. After high school, she went on to attend Pierce College in Los Angeles. However, she ended up dropping out. Elaine was described as a spunky young woman with an abundance of friends and a passion for dance, poetry, music, and many other artistic type things. She was an aspiring actress who received work as an extra in other small roles and several movies and TV shows, including Crazy Stupid Love, Role Models, ER, Mad TV, and Desperate Housewives. It was reported that around this time, Elaine had lost her job at a restaurant and began battling depression. Elaine was last seen on the night of January 27th, 2017, when her and her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Divine Compere, or Div, as many of his friends called him, met up at his house in the 2600 block of Delphine Lane in Calabasas. Elaine's mother, Susan, sent her a text at 10 p.m., and then Elaine and Div left in an Uber to go see a late movie. The pair then returned to Div's home around 1 a.m., and security footage from the Compere home corroborates this timeline. Divine's family lived in an enormous, which is what many of the homes in Calabasas are known for, and Div actually lived in the guest house by himself. So it was on the Compere property. Divine is the son of successful Hollywood business mogul Shaquem Compere. According to Divine, Elaine woke up at 4 a.m. and was having what appeared to be a panic attack. She was shaking and pacing back and forth while singing and talking to herself. Divine tried to calm her down, but she was determined to leave, so she dressed herself in a hurry and left. Surveillance footage from the Compere home showed her walking to her car at 6:05 a.m. Now, there are a lot of questions surrounding the fact that there is a 2-hour gap between the time Elaine woke up in a panic and the time she actually left the Compare home. What exactly was she doing for those 2 hours? That seems to be the biggest question right now. So she did not appear upset or stressed at the time that she was spotted on the surveillance footage. The footage then shows her pulling out of the gated residence, and after she drives away, the security camera stops recording. I'm not quite sure why it stops recording, but it stops recording once a car pulls away, which is kind of weird, but that is the last time that anyone sees or hears from Elaine again. For the next few days, phone calls and texts from her boyfriend Div, as well as her mother, go unanswered. Her mother became extremely worried and called the Glendale Police Department, who told her that because Elaine was technically an adult, she probably ran off and didn't want to talk to anyone. And that's what they always say. I feel like that's what they always say when they are 18 or older. Oh, she probably just didn't want to talk to anybody. She probably just ran off. But how many times does that really happen?
Yeah, I know what you mean, that I hear that a lot. But honestly, between those 18 to 19 years old, you don't hear that as much as, say somebody a little older or life events getting ready to happen, such as a marriage or something like that. That to me, that strikes me as odd that they would even say, oh, she probably doesn't want to talk to anybody.
Absolutely. They actually advised her to call back the following day if she hadn't heard from her daughter. And then on July 30th, Susan still hadn't heard from her daughter, so she filed a missing persons report. Then on February 2nd, just 6 days later, Elaine's charcoal gray 4-door 2015 Honda Civic was found abandoned on the side of Pacific Coast Highway just south of Coral Canyon Road in Malibu, which is also an area known as Dark Canyon. The area is approximately 20 miles and about a 45-minute drive from Divine's house. The doors were all unlocked. The keys were still in the ignition in the on position. However, the car itself was shut off. The lights were on and the battery was dead. Inside the car, police found her cell phone in the middle console and her backpack in the passenger seat. Police also found her laptop, her driver's license, money, and a few other personal belongings of Elaine's. However, there was no sign of Elaine herself. Police found no blood at the scene and no signs of a struggle of any kind. This caused investigators to believe that Elaine had abandoned her car and walked down to the ocean to commit suicide.
And was in such a state, though, that, as you said, that she left the ignition on. So, just, with her bouts of depression, I can only imagine at that time, what she was feeling, to where just in this rush of a state to not even turn off her car.
Yeah, she didn't turn off her car. She didn't do anything. And while they said that she was in a panic, well, Divine said she was in a panic. But on the footage, it doesn't show her as looking frantic. So all the reports are saying that when she was actually leaving there, she wasn't frantic. So that kind of takes me back to that 2-hour gap. Okay. She woke up at 4 a.m. in a panic, but she didn't leave until 6:05. So what happened? What did happen in those 2 hours? Was he able to calm her down enough to not be in that frantic state anymore, but not enough to stay there? Or, it's just kind of weird. It's weird that there was such a big gap. And, maybe police know what happened in that gap and they're not saying, but
that's what it's sounding like, is that he was able to calm her down enough. And as you had said, that he was trying to get her to stay, but she still decided not to. If the camera footage is showing, okay, she leaves in a calm state, something obviously kind of got her elevated again, because for her to go down this dark canyon road and leave the car on, that's where, and then just abandon it like that to me says that she was heightened again and she just had to get out of there.
Exactly. So authorities brought in bloodhounds, cadaver dogs, drones, ATVs, and a dive team to search the cliffs and surrounding areas, but there was no sign of Elaine still. While investigators believed that suicide was a very strong possibility, her family did not believe that Elaine would do such a thing. While they acknowledge that Elaine had bouts of depression, they insist that she had a strong passion for life and never showed any signs of wanting to end her own life. The police did question Elaine's boyfriend, Divine, and he did fully cooperate with police and was quickly ruled out as a suspect. With this news and the fact that police simply refused to conduct a search of the Compare residence, Elaine's mother, Susan, hired a private investigator by the name of Jaden Brandt. After taking on his own investigation, Brandt's take on the case was different from what authorities believed about the theory that Elaine committed suicide. Brandt believes that foul play was involved in Elaine's disappearance. And when speaking with police about anything found during the investigation, authorities were quick to dismiss it, saying that it was just theories that could not be corroborated. Sounds to me like they didn't really want to do any more searching, kind of. It sounds like, looks like suicide. We're going to chalk that up to a suicide. I mean, heaven forbid there be any other direction that case could have gone, because that would have required more work. I don't know. I'm probably being judgmental, but I feel like there's plenty in this case that could have been investigated. Now, maybe it was investigated and I just don't know about it, but it sounds like they were really quick to write it off as a suicide.
No, I totally agree that it almost seems like they had already made up in their mind what had went down and they weren't really interested in looking any further.
There are several theories surrounding Elaine's disappearance. Did she commit suicide? That's definitely a possibility. One such theory is probably the one that is most theorized, and that is that Elaine did in fact tragically end her own life. She was known to have bouts of depression, and she had recently lost her job, and she had recently dropped out of college. Divine told authorities that she woke up extremely distraught, and he could not calm her down. Had the two been in a fight that night, or maybe she was having some sort of manic episode and drove somewhere where she could just end it all? Or did she drive somewhere where she could just breathe and kind of calm herself down and something far more sinister take place? Another theory is that she could have been abducted. Could Elaine and her boyfriend have gotten into a fight the night before, and Elaine decided to leave and go out for a drive, what I was just saying basically, towards Pacific Coast Highway? Once there, she could have decided to pull over, especially if she started having an anxiety attack again, or maybe just needed some fresh ocean air, and while sitting on the side of the road, she was abducted. Pacific Coast Highway is a pretty busy highway, and it's highly unlikely that this theory happened without anyone seeing her. That's the only downfall to that theory, and in my opinion.
Even that time of like early morning, is it that busy?
I think Pacific Coast Highway is always busy. You know, I mean, I don't know, I think the chances of something like that happening on such a busy highway, no matter what time of day or night it was, and no one seeing a thing, are pretty slim. Although, you know, who's to say that no one saw anything? Not everyone is ready to come forward, you know? Not everyone, not everyone will come forward. They might be afraid of, you know, what could happen to them. I don't know.
Well, I even think about around where we live. When you pass something on the side of the highway, at first, you know, you're just passing and you're not really paying attention that much. It's like, oh, well, that looks weird. And you wonder how many people passed by then and thought, oh, well, that's odd, but then just went on about their day.
Yeah, I think that happens far more often than we really think about. Or they could have saw something and said, I don't want any part of that. I'm going to stay right out of it. You know, not everyone's going to stop. Not everyone's going to, you don't even have to stop. Like, not everyone's going to call the police. They might just straight up be like, you know, I'm just going to keep going. I don't know what's happening back there, but it doesn't involve me. It's none of my business. Then there's the theory that maybe Divine did something to her. Is it possible that Divine could have followed her out to Pacific Coast Highway and got her to pull over to the side of the road and then lured her somewhere else? According to an article posted in the Crime Wire, Divine has never stated that the two had been arguing that night, but there is, what I mentioned earlier, that time frame between the time Elaine woke up in a panic state and the time she actually left Divine's home. We have a 2-hour window that is unaccounted for. In 2021, Elaine's case gained more attention when it became the center of a true crime podcast hosted by Neil Strauss called To Live and Die in LA. This podcast shed some light on the fact that Elaine and her mother's relationship was treacherous. The podcast is a series that is hosted by Neil, like I mentioned, and has him and his then wife, Ingrid, Incubus bassist Mike Eisinger, and his wife, Anne Marie, working an investigation that is led by private investigator Jaden Brandt. And as I mentioned earlier, Jaden Brandt is the PI hired by Susan Park. Susan is also involved in this podcast.
And remind me, Susan Park is the mother, right?
Yes, Susan is Elaine's mother. While some believe the podcast was based on speculation and amateur armchair detective work, many believe that Elaine's mother either killed her or played a part in her disappearance. And podcast takes the listener in many directions as to who may be responsible for Elaine's disappearance. But while I did really love the podcast, and I did, and I think Neil Strauss does an amazing job, he also adds many disclaimers. So he's trying to be very transparent that he is not accusing any one person, but I did feel like he really does present it as though Elaine's mother was responsible for her daughter being missing.
Okay, at this point, I'm not hearing anything that's suggesting that her mother would have played a part, that it seemed like Div was the guy that was with her that night.
Well, put a pin in that because we will come to that. So Neil Strauss did catch a lot of flack for that podcast that he did. And if you haven't heard it, though, I seriously would highly, highly recommend it. It is a good podcast, but you have to keep a very open mind and you can be very easily swayed in one direction or the other. But so the podcast did reveal some things that I do think was very suspicious and are definitely worth mentioning. At one point, Susan asked Elaine's father, Ray, to take Elaine because either her or Elaine was going to end up hurt. They just did not get along, and I believe their relationship was also somewhat violent. The next one is that Susan tried to rent out Elaine's room less than 3 months after Elaine disappeared. The podcast brought this up, and I can actually see both sides of the coin on this one. While it's super strange that Susan would rent Elaine's room out so quickly, not even knowing if her daughter had just taken off for a while or exactly what was going on, I also understand that Susan was a single mother, although her kids were grown, and she was a single woman on her own, and rent is extremely high in LA. But then on the other side of that, too, it's more common for loved ones of missing children, especially, to leave their child's room exactly as they had left it for so many years. So for her to just kind of wipe everything out and be trying to rent it out only 3 months, she didn't know if Elaine was coming back. She didn't know at that point. She still doesn't know at this point, but it's just been a lot longer. But after 3 months, she had no idea if Elaine was coming back, if she had just kind of bounced for a little bit and thought, I'm going to just check out and do my thing and I'll come back. She was 19 years old, or 20 years old.
Yeah, that's really telling right there, that renting out the room 3 months after her daughter disappears, that she's either given up hope or, she was ready to move on.
So another one that was mentioned was the day that Elaine went missing, her mother had been texting her about $20 that she had loaned her daughter previously and was wanting paid back right away. This seemed like a common thing between the two of them, and while it may seem very petty, it's just something to note. It's unclear what exactly the text messages said, but Susan and her daughter were reported to have been pretty vulgar and mean to each other, and this was a constant with them. Susan would lend Elaine money, and it seems like it didn't matter how much. It could have been $5, but she was very adamant about getting every single penny of that back. And she would get pretty hateful when she wasn't getting it back as quickly as she wanted it to.
Do we know if Susan had any history of drug use?
None that has been reported. After Elaine's disappearance, Susan tried to renovate and remove furniture from her home. When cadaver dogs were brought in to search the home, one of them actually hit on a piece of furniture that had been inside the home. They also picked up the scent of human decomp outside of Elaine's bedroom door alongside the door frame, at the foot of her bed also, and inside of her bedroom closet, as well as sense of interest inside a cleaning closet near Elaine's bedroom and outside in the shed. So that was something that was in the podcast, and it was a lot of things like this adding up that made Neil and the team just kind of side-eye Susan.
Yeah, I mean, just as you're talking and more is not making sense. You could forgive a couple of things or just think, oh, well, that's odd. But it seems like things just keep on not adding up. And I could definitely see where the pod creators would be like, okay, this isn't making sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's why I'm kind of like, maybe listeners should listen to that podcast themselves. So after authorities reportedly removed the clothes that were found in Elaine's car left on the side of the road, they were given to Susan, who then washed the clothes and hung them in the closet. Did she wash any potential evidence? That's the big question, and that's the question that the podcasters and Neil and his team were questioning, because I would think that the police would have maybe already taken that stuff to the crime lab and they did their thing, I would think. But I don't know, because it was counted as a suicide. So maybe they were just like, here's all your daughter's things. We're treating this as a suicide. But why in the world would you wash that stuff? Why would you even want to wash it? Even if that was my child, heaven forbid, oh my gosh, I simply, for no other reason, would not wash those clothes, because I would want to remember her. I would want that scent. I'd probably be sleeping with those clothes. That smells like my child. She washes it and hangs it up. To me, super weird.
Yeah, I mean, the whole issue right there, I mean, that's just weird. That one, we already said that the police, they had already counted this as a suicide, so they were really just trying to do as least work as possible. But, I'm just thinking, as far as, I wonder if that is kind of normal. If you consider something a suicide, so in their mind, they think it's a suicide, and they're just being nice, giving the mother the clothes, right? So she has something to remember her child by, right? That she can have that scent if she wants, because that's her child, right? That's the last that she has of her. But then for Susan to wash him, I'm really just wondering, if she's not hiding anything, what kind of state of mind that Susan was in as a mother. That's kind of where I wondered, okay, is there any drug use? You had mentioned that Elaine had bouts of depression. Usually that's hereditary, so I'm kind of wondering if Susan also had that even before all of this happened.
That's quite the possibility. I mean, they're not mentioning that. No one has mentioned that she was battling it also, but it's quite possible that she was. So another thing mentioned in the podcast was the fact that a card was found in the pocket of one of Elaine's pieces of clothing. And the card was for someone hiring erotic dancers. And it appeared as if the card had been planted. Then Susan had tried to convince Neil Strauss that it may have been possible that Elaine was involved in prostitution, because Susan had found a black leather kinky outfit in Elaine's dresser drawer. This, to me, sounded like such an outrageous thing for a mother to suggest, just based on the fact that you found something kinky in your 20-year-old daughter's dresser drawer. I mean, I don't know. I feel like a lot of young girls that age probably have something, whether it's a thong or, I don't know, something that a mother might be like, oh, this is kind of kinky, but you're going to jump to something as outrageous as she could be prostituting.
That is funny to me. One, I'm not going to look in my daughter's dresser drawers, because I'd probably be a little scared of what I found. And because once you find out those things, you can't go back. So that's me personally. But as a mother, yeah, that's odd that you would go to that extreme, that, oh, I found this, she must be prostituting.
Yeah, that's a big leap. I mean, I don't know what her behavior was, and I guess her mother knows her better than anybody else, but it just seemed like such a huge leap to come to that conclusion. So another thing that was mentioned was the fact that Elaine and her best friend Sadie had been in a car accident, and the two weren't seriously injured. However, Susan pushed Elaine to file a claim for pain and suffering. Through text messages, it was discovered that Susan was really pushing for Elaine to go see a friend of hers who was a chiropractor. So then after she saw the chiropractor, she could then go file a claim. Susan was expecting to receive half of that money awarded to Elaine. According to the Live and Die in LA podcast, after calling the insurance company to see whatever happened with the claim, it was determined that the claim had been settled and the form had been signed with Elaine's name 6 weeks after her disappearance.
6 weeks after?
Yeah, 6 weeks after her disappearance. So I know that Susan had really, really, really pushed. And Elaine was kind of at the point where she just didn't, she's like, I'm not really hurt. I don't really think that I need to file this claim. And her mother was very, very persistent with her doing this. And she had said that she was going to get half. Now, I don't know why she thought she was entitled to half of that, but money seemed like was a big drive for Susan. And I don't know why. I mean, I don't know if it was just the greed aspect of it, or maybe she was struggling financially, but it was strange to me that it got signed 6 weeks after Elaine disappeared. As I mentioned, Susan and Elaine fought all the time, and one of the texts sent by Susan was of the two fighting, and Susan texted Elaine the words in all caps, "Die, die, 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 die." And like I said, they're in all caps with exclamation points. And a lot of the text messages between the two, Susan would refer to her daughter as, quote, shithead, unquote, and tell her how much she makes her sick. This was pretty concerning, and Susan doesn't deny it. She actually had claimed that she was a bad mother. However, I mean, when you look at it, that doesn't make her a killer. But again, you've got all these things adding up that definitely make her a bad mother. But again, she won't deny that she's a bad mother. So I kind of just want our listeners, I don't want to sway anybody in any direction. I simply want to state the facts. And I want our listeners to just kind of decide for themselves what they think, because, everything that I'm stating was reports of actual things. There's actual text messages that say some of these things. And so, draw your own conclusion. I don't know.
Well, there seems to be a lot of evidence of things that happened between Susan and her daughter. But I wonder, is there any other evidence of the relationship between Dev and Elaine? Anything that could kind of to make us look that maybe him more of a suspect?
Well, there is. So according to Live and Die in LA podcast, a few weeks before the final time that Elaine met up with Divine Compare, she had broken things off with him because she felt like his life wasn't going anywhere, and she really wanted to work on getting her own life in order. She had mentioned to him through text message that he should use that time to begin working on his own life and that they couldn't be together. There had been no communication between them from January 3rd to January 20th. Then he sends her a dozen messages in a row with no response from Elaine. This was 8 days before her disappearance. In one of his messages to Elaine, he states, quote, "We need to talk about this. Don't do anything crazy," unquote. It's unclear what Divine may have been referring to, but it was also revealed in the To Live and Die in LA podcast that on July 27th, 2015, Elaine was attending a concert held at the Orange County Observatory with several performers such as Father and Playboy Cardi. Elaine was raped by multiple men backstage while extremely intoxicated by drugs and or alcohol. She lost all of her belongings, including her keys, And the only way she even was made aware of the rape was because someone had videotaped the assault and had shown her a video of it taking place. She had also posted a couple of things that night on social media, one of which stated, quote, "I hope I don't die tonight," unquote. Deleted tweets were recovered after her disappearance by Jaden Brandt, where she talked about the rape and about the fact that, quote, "You know who you are and you know what you did," unquote. And she talked about seeking justice for the attack. So did the individuals responsible for the rape take action to silence her? According to some of Elaine's friends, Elaine was going to Devine's house the night she went missing to try and gain his support and use him as a witness before going to the police about the assault. Even though she couldn't remember anything about what happened, she was extremely determined to get answers about what happened. However, according to her own tweets that were recovered, she was not planning to go to the police, but instead, she was more determined to work on herself and forgive the rapist so that she could move on. Another person in Elaine's life who Jaden Brandt was questioning was a previous boyfriend of Elaine's named Lolo. Lolo was 19 years old, and they both had gotten arrested at one point because Lolo got caught with an unlicensed firearm. He was sent to go to trial, and Elaine was reportedly set to testify against him. Elaine had tried to separate herself from him, but it was reported that Lolo had that stalkerish type of mentality and would constantly text her. Jaden located Lolo in Inglewood, California, and when confronted, he was told that Elaine was missing, and he actually began to cry. He seemed pretty genuine, and Jaden mentions in the podcast that he seemed pretty genuine when he was told that Elaine was even missing.
So, like, he had no idea.
He had absolutely no idea. He said he hadn't talked to her in quite some time, and he was just incredibly shocked. And like I said, he was standing there in the street and he was holding a skateboard because Jaden just kind of was watching the house and saw him coming up on the house and kind of blindsided him and started talking about it. And as soon as he told Lolo what happened, or well, that she went missing, he dropped his skateboard and he just began crying. And I don't know. I mean, he could either be a really good actor or be pretty genuine in the fact that he had no idea she was gone. So as I mentioned, this case takes us down several rabbit holes as to what actually happened to Elaine in the wee hours of that fateful morning. While Elaine's relationship with her mother was very troubled and she had recently broke things off with her boyfriend, it doesn't make them killers. I want to make it clear that investigators have interviewed Susan Park as well as Divine Compare, and neither have been named as suspects in Elaine's disappearance. In an effort to clear her name against the mass amount of speculation being spun by the media and by social media in Elaine's case, the newspaper outlet The Local Malibu has released information that Susan Park had taken a polygraph in the summer of 2020 in order to clear her name from any and all involvement in the disappearance of her daughter. The results of that test show no deception. Susan has cooperated with law enforcement, private investigators, and all persons involved in her daughter's case since Elaine went missing in 2017. Elaine Park was 20 years old at the time of her disappearance. She is 5 foot 5 inches tall, weighing 125 pounds, with brown hair, brown eyes, and of Asian Korean descent. She was last seen wearing a white sweatshirt and denim shorts, but she may be wearing gray sweatpants. Elaine suffers from depression and is classified as a critical missing person. Now, the classification of critical missing person basically means that someone is in need of medical attention, is the victim of a crime or foul play, or someone that has no pattern of running away or disappearing. If you have any information into the disappearance of Elaine Park, please call the Glendale Police Department at area code 818-548-4911 or the Elaine Park tip line at 1-800-551-3080.
Thank you for listening to another Gone in a Blink. Follow us on any of our social media sites. You can follow us on Facebook at Goneinablinkpodcast or on Instagram at Goneinablinkpod. And if you have any idea for a show or have a loved one who is missing, we'd love to hear about it. You can email us at goneinablinkpod@gmail.com. And last but not least, be safe, be smart, and try not to blink.